Welcome to Everyone Loves Guitar, where we get to sit down and talk with interesting professional guitar players and related music industry experts. If you love playing guitar, stick around. You're in the right place. I'm Craig Garber, host of the Everyone Loves Guitar podcast. What you may not know about me is that I'm also the author of the book, How to Make Maximum Money with Minimum Customers. And since March of 2000, I've been running a busy marketing consulting firm. During this time, I've helped over 300 clients in 108 different industries all over the world sell everything from $20 books to $5,000 seminar seats and everything in between. Now, if you own or operate a business, ask yourself the following marketing-related questions and be brutally honest with your answers. Do you have an email list of prospects and customers, but you have no idea what to say to them, how often to say it, or how to make money with this list? Is your business website consistently generating new leads and making sales? Is it making you any money at all? If not, do you know why? Is your advertising effective? Is it consistently making you money? And do you know how to use social media effectively to market your business? If any one of these questions are puzzling you, then you need to book a one-on-one marketing strategy session with me if your business qualifies. After this strategy session, you'll know how to speak to and make money with your email list, how to use your website to attract customers and clients who are ready to buy from you now, and how to sell your goods and services for top dollar and at much higher profit margins than your competition. Listen, stop hoping things will get better on their own. Hope is not a very good business strategy. Instead, book a marketing strategy session with me by going to everyonelovesguitar.com/marketing and find out if your business meets the 5 criteria you need to qualify for this service. Again, that's everyonelovesguitar.com/marketing. Thank you for listening, and now let's get on with the show. Hey everybody, this is Craig Garber from Everyone Loves Guitar, and we're going to show some love to the rhythm section today. I've got a really outstanding bass player, but beyond that, he's an incredibly experienced musician. He's got tons of really good stories. He's been involved with just literally hundreds and hundreds of high-quality people and artists and bands and industry experience that he's played with. We're here with Mark Prentice. Mark is a Grammy-winning record producer and a very in-demand studio bass player, music director, and hit songwriter. His versatile and exhaustive music industry resume, and I've trimmed this down, includes recording and performance credits with the following people: Elvis Costello, John Fogarty, Desmond Child, Fairfield 4, Lyle Lovett, B.J. Thomas, Frankie Miller, Delbert McClinton, Ricky Skaggs, Olivia Newton-John, Amy Grant, Vince Gill, Johnny Cash, Don McLean, Crystal Gale, Kevin Griffin from Better Than Ezra, Jennifer Nettles, Michael McDonald, Bruce Springsteen, Stephen Van Zant, Bruce Hornsby, Felix Cavaliere, and the Young Rascals, Charlie Pride, Steve Earle, Allison Moorer, Sam Moore, Billy Preston, Benny King, Michelle Wright, Jennifer Hansen, John Oates, Pat Boone, Patty Page, Lady Antebellum, Rodney Atkins, Chuck Wicks, Paulette Carlson, Bruce Cockburn, Holly Williams, Bo Diddley, Mitch Ryder, and literally hundreds of other people. So here's the deal. There's 2 demographics here. If you're over like 40, you'll relate to this. If you're under 40, this is going to be a lesson, so take out your notebook and pay attention. Mark spent 2013 on tour as a bassist and musical director for Once Upon a Dream, which is a Stephen Van Zant production featuring the reunion of the Young Rascals. His current projects include producing the latest project for Grammy Hall of Fame artist B.J. Thomas and playing on and touring with Don McLean in a new record, as well as music for 2 feature films, a television show, and various artist projects. Mark, thank you so much for your time, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, happy to be here with you, Craig.
Thank you. Just to tell the audience, Mark was just telling me some stories just before the call, and it was just amazing. So I'm really excited about this. You've worked with some very iconic artists, and I want to just go through some of them. I don't even know if I'll get through all the ones I listed, but can you tell me for each of these folks how you got the gig, what you remember about the experience, like if there's any cool or interesting, non-gossip kind of stories, and if there were any takeaways or lessons that you might have learned from the experience. So let's start with John Fogarty.
Well, I had this great experience with John in a production role, a kind of a music director role for this old group of black gospel singers, the Fairfield Four, that sang on his Blue Moon Swamp record and sang on a song called 110 in the Shade, and then subsequently went on to open on that tour for him. And this was at a point, this was the first record John had made after getting through all of the Saul Zant's nonsense, and he had taken a long time doing it. The day that I spent with him, and he was very, very reverent to these old guys. I mean, he couldn't have been any sweeter. He's a very, those records sound so simple, but in my experience with John, he's very exacting. And we had parts, but he recorded them multiple times and probably had done this at every stage of the game, and then you end up with this record that sounds very simple, but he's really studied the details, and we had a great day with him. And I guess what I would have taken from that experience was just his focus on this thing. He'd been working on this record for months, camped out in the studio, and his focus and his intensity were, and I don't mean intensity like that was a negative. I just mean
I don't take
how
it like
in
that.
the moment he was and how focused he was on every detail of that, and still within the creative flow, like not stopping things, not nitpicking, but just understanding where he was and sort of keeping in his head and talking to his engineer about these takes that he liked. And this was on tape, so they're changing reels of tape to get 9 takes of each thing, but he's like aware of it. Hey, mark that one, and a gentleman throughout to me. And I had lived in Phoenix and briefly knew his brother Tom, who had kind of retired over there just a little bit. But we weren't friends or anything. I just played with him or recorded with him once, I think. Anyway, I thought John was a gentleman. I really enjoyed him, and I enjoyed how much game I just saw something with him the other day, dude has still got all of his game and some,
And he's playing with his son now, which has got to be rewarding for him.
Yeah, it's got to be great. Yeah.
So you got referred to him by his brother Tom. Is that how you got the gig in the first place?
No. This was through the Fairfield experience.
Oh, through the Fairfield guys. Okay.
And as a matter of fact, his other brother was his sort of personal manager, and said, you might the impression I got was that, and John's written about this, he and Tom, we're just estranged over the issue of the band, which was kind of sad. And Tom had passed away by the time I saw John. So, anyway, whatever.
So when you're talking about his simplicity, I guess if I understand you right, even though John's music is, I guess, simple in the sense of technically or even arrangement wise, it's deliberate. It's not because he's limited and this is what they play. This is a deliberate thing to present his ideas in this format.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very
and I'm
interesting.
saying that on that record, production wise, a lot of it's very, very sparse. It's kind of guitar, bass, drums, I'm just saying what sounds like a bunch of guys got together and played this thing one time was the subject of a lot more intention than that. He really understood what, when the moment was right. He was looking for a moment and found it. Big respect for that. It's a lot easy. It's a lot harder to make something production-wise. It's a lot harder to make a sparse track that knocks you on your butt than it is to just fill things up with excitement.
I totally get that. Yeah, and I think there's a lesson there as far as, and I see this, coming from the business world, I see this parallel in music all the time where. Oftentimes, people on the outside who haven't, let's say, done the thing that they're looking at are quick to judge and say, "Oh, man, this is no big deal. It's 3 chords, or it's this, or it's right. In John's case, it's Chuck Berry jazzed up or electrified." But saying that and doing that are two dramatically different things, and I think people really don't know the intensity that goes into being successful, whether it's in business or whether it's in music.
Right. Well, and the unique individual voice that makes these people who they are. So I can take a beginning guitar student and teach him to play every B.B. King lick in about a week.
Sure.
but he can live to be 70 and it'll never feel like that, you know. Right. It's you know, and down here, Pig Robbins, piano player that played a lot of these country, Floyd Kramer, you know, piano intros on things. All of us can play that stuff, but nobody can play it quite like that's the human part of this that, you know, and that's what I would say about John. I don't think of his thing as sort of simple in the sense of being elementary. I mean, he just is referring to references that are, but you know, and I'll tell you another little story about him that I thought was exceptionally cool. Very shortly after we did this thing, he moved to Nashville for a brief time. You know, I know that he reached out to, there was a guy I was playing sessions with, this guy named Bill Hullett, who's a tele master and had, you know, done some instructional VHS, you know, whatever we did back then. And VHS. And the phone rings at his house and it's Fogarty saying, "Hey, I just moved to town. I wondered if you'd be willing to give me some lessons," you know?
Wow.
Now, here's a guy who's an icon, but wants to keep getting better. You know, and unabashed, he didn't have his manager call him or anything. He just called him up and said, "Hey, it's John. You want to," you know, it's just, I think that's incredibly cool. You know, I think that's incredibly cool.
Well, in the last week, I interviewed Slash's guitar player and I interviewed Jeff Beck, one of the young women who play guitar for him. And they both said almost verbatim the same thing. They said, the thing that I'm amazed about Slash or Beck was that he has a guitar in his hand 24/7. He's playing constantly, you know, and that's that old adage of school's never out for the pro.
Right.
You know, it's why Michael Jordan showed up before the game, took 1,000 foul shots, and after the game, win, lose, took 1,000 foul shots. And I think,
absolutely.
And I think that's the more important story to this is shit is not easy at that level. Well,
and that hard work beats talent every time.
Right.
You know,
100%.
It just does. You know, and I imparted, you know, try to impart this to my kids, and now they've both been out in the world and seen it, like especially in a touring situation. And I've done a fair amount of music directing like that, or band leading, or whatever, back in the day. I will take an average player with a great attitude and a great work ethic over the prodigy that's a personality problem every single time, because a touring gig is about learning this show and showing up and playing it correctly with a lot of energy and a great intention every night. And you know, if it takes you 30 hours to learn it or 30 minutes, I don't care, as long as you you don't get any points for that, you know, except in your own. So this is all, you know, part of what I try to help young aspiring guys understand is, you know, your work ethic and your set of professional skills and stuff are the things that will, you know, if we're going to talk about where creativity and business intersect, you've got to have the business piece of this together, and you've got to understand that you are a small independent business person pursuing this thing out in the world, and that, you know, being able to sweep pick is not going to be enough.
Yeah,
you know?
Totally. I totally get it.
Yeah.
Vince Gill.
Well, I've worked with Vince in 2 or 3 different settings. Played with him on a record for a dear friend of mine named Andrea Zahn, who's the woman that plays violin and sings with James Taylor, just really talented person. She worked with Vince for years, and so he guested on her record. It was there when we recorded that, and then also I took the Fairfield 4 guys and put them on a record of Amy Grant's that Vince produced. So we were worked together like that. And I run into him all the time. All my friends play with him, and I see him at the Opry. And you know, he's if you ever get to town here, there's a Monday night thing called the Time Jumpers that just and Vince is he's a member of that band. He just because he loves to play. Yeah. You know, and all the way through. I very first met Vince probably like 1990, maybe, like right before he was, you know, quote unquote Vince Gill. I mean, he was down here and playing with Roseanne Cash and all. And in my arm's length relationship with him, I would say he's the person the least affected by that level of fame of anybody that I've met. You know, he's essentially the same guy. I mean, you gotta watch yourself, because people come from out of nowhere and think they know you and want to be your best. So you have to have a little bit of a wall up, but he's a real character, man, and just a really great guy.
I hear that consistently from every single person who's worked with. I mean, that's the first thing everybody says. What a sweet guy he is.
Yeah. My wife, who before we were married, came down here to visit with some friends, and she's was really unaware of country music, period. But they invited her to a "#1" party for Vince at ASCAP, and she got there and rode up on the elevator with Vince, not knowing it was Vince, and said, he said, "What are you here for?" And she said, "I'm here for this #1 party for Vince Gill." And she said, "Do you know which one is Vince?" And the elevator door opened. He pointed at some guy that looked like George Costanza. So she said, we're talking to her friends, and she goes, "Wow, that's Vince Gill." And I'm like, "Oh, that's Vince Gill," and he's waving to her and that's just typical.
That's so funny
of Vince. I mean, everybody. He's very, very highly thought of guy down here, and an incredible musician, and to your point, a guy who still just absolutely loves playing the guitar. I mean, obviously, he comes down to this. My understanding is he initially kind of invited himself to this Monday night thing with the original Time Jumpers just because he wanted a chance to air out those swing chops and play. Sit in the back and play.
Yeah. So, that's awesome. I hear that literally from everybody. Jerry tells the story that Jerry McPherson tells the story that he was on tour. Did you hear that? He was on tour with Vince, and Vince doesn't check in under a pseudonym. He checks in under Vince Gill in the hotel. And Jerry's like, "Vince, like, what are you doing?" He goes, "Don't people call you?" And Vince goes, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, what do you do?" He goes, "I talk to him." and that was just like,
exactly,
okay. So I hear stories like that from every single person. That's awesome. Johnny Cash, talk about a lifetime experience.
Yeah, this was again with the Fairfield Four, and this was as it turned out, kind of toward the end of Cash's time, and they sang on actually they were on the Fogarty tour, and I went up and got them in Louisville and drove them back to Nashville in the morning so that they could do this, and it took them back. But they came in and sang on a bunch of kind of older spiritual things. It was going to be for a children's record, I think. And it was at Jack Clement, Cowboy Clement's place, and it was the quintessential old school Nashville experience. And Cash showed up, and they all met and all knew these songs sort of, and just jumped in. And he was not well. He was late for that session, and Cowboy told me it was because he was not feeling well. And it was within just maybe a week or two after that they announced that he had this, I think it's stride drag or something that eventually, took his life. But he was, even at that age and even not feeling well, just a presence in the room. And, his sort of signature thing where he kind of, before he sings, at least that day, it seemed to me like that's probably just him getting his key, and they left it on the records, Really
so
cool. Really cool. Yeah.
That's great.
I never put two and two together with that. I thought that was like his little signature thing, and it kind of is, but it wouldn't surprise me to find out that on those early records, that was just there because he was getting himself ready to sing that note, and they didn't have any, they didn't have any way to take that out, so it became a thing. That's I'm awesome. Making that up, but it seemed that way to me.
Explain who Cowboy Clement is, because for people.
Jack Clement was a guitar player, producer. He's legendary down here. He was involved with Elvis, songwriter, and later in life ran, all of his life involved in record production and all this. And he had this list of, I'll have to get it for you, of Cowboys rules for the studio, and it was, it only takes 3 minutes to cut a hit, and never bring anyone to a session, and don't mention the word headphones or cans or mix, or he just wanted you to play. Don't, and never talk when the cowboy is speaking. That was one of them. And but he was just really, really cool, old school. There's a Nashville thing down here of these old school guys it's a reflective of a time that doesn't exist anymore.
Sure.
When you literally had a great song and an artist that was successful, and you went in and you had to get a performance, a 3-minute performance. You weren't gonna, there was no way to endlessly, mind fuck this thing and keep going. You had to, you went to capture the lightning in a bottle or whatever. And boy, these guys were, when I first moved here, I got to work with a bunch of it. It was so amazing. Having not been raised in that thing at all, I fell in love with these guys like instantly. It's just really a different wild period of time, man. I'd love to have been around in the 60s when Waylon and Kristofferson and these guys would get together for a long drunken weekend to impress each other with their songs. It just must have been incredible.
But I would imagine when you're doing that, it also, you're being commanded to like really perform at a very high level. That's got to be great for your chops and your like mental acuity to just be able to, produce that.
Well, yeah, and just to that point, like, so, for the longest time, because I've been doing this a long time, I've been doing this since I was a teenager, and as you get into more tracks and stuff, but even when I first moved here, everything was on tape, and it was a 24-track deal. So as the bass player, you pretty much were going for a take, and in terms of fixing something, they could get you in, but it was hard to get a long signal out, so unless there was a whole note place or something, if you punched in, you were going to play till the end of the song again. So that, the focus was and drummers too, especially, a lot of this stuff was just to get a drum track, really, because there wasn't any punching drums in and out or whatever, cymbals ringing over. As that morphed into this digital thing, that is that's the grail now, and that's the way it's going to be. I still get to record on tape once in a while. It's very interesting to remember what that was like and how quickly it went away once this all started. But everybody can punch in anything, and pretty much now, and so drummers, again, my older son Matthew, incredible drummer, plays on all kinds of records here, but he came up in that world where it's nothing for him to say, give me the second chorus, and that's all possible, and it's great. I'm not putting that down, but so he and I did a thing. He ended up being on this session they did just earlier this year. I didn't realize they had done this, but the old Columbia Studio A, which had been converted into offices, I guess the Kerr Belmont Music School reconfigured as Studio A, and they used it as a educational thing. And we went in and did a track in there, and Matt was the drummer. And of course, you're in one big room that looks like Abbey Road. There's some gobos around the drums, but there's no drum booth. The piano's live in the room, the guitar's live in the room, and I watched Matty look at this situation and understand right away, okay, this is a different deal. This is now we got to get this all at once, because you can't punch the piano in. There's drums on the piano, right?
Sure.
So, and the guys that cut those tracks in those rooms back in the day, sometimes the acoustic guitar player was sitting right next to the drummer. I mean, their focus had to be, I'm going to get this start to finish, and it is a really cool focus to have, because all of us sort of, it's just in the DNA now. We all know we can punch in and fix anything, and some of the younger cats will say, hey, fly my second chorus to the first chorus, because they know that's right, and they could do it at home. It's like word processing or something, and so the world has changed. It's not better or worse, but as a musician, the focus of that stuff, and I made a couple of records, played on a couple of records for Patti Page, and those things were done. I mean, herself, the background singers, the whole band. That was one swing,
Holy crap.
That was one swing, yeah. And all of that stuff from that period of time was. I mean, that's how those things were done. So you were either that good or you weren't in the game.
Well, that's what I was going to say. The focus was really on more. Your success truly was dependent more on your musicianship.
Oh, man.
Than it is today. Not that there's bad players, because everybody's a good player, especially in Nashville. You don't get there and into the studio, but the focus was on your playability skills, your musicianship, more than anything else.
And all of the pieces that went with that, like we're talking about, your focus and your intensity. So when I first got here, I was really lucky to break into that scene very quickly. But a lot of what I did was playing on song demos, which we did down here, and we typically get 5 great tracks in a 3-hour session. I mean, it just, people come here and watch what we do, and it blows their mind, and it blew mine, you know. But when I would get booked on, then as I moved up and I'd get booked on masters here, what they would typically do is back when there was money in records, they'd book, 10 sessions, 2 sessions a day for a week, and you'd basically cut 1 song a session. So you'd work out the details of this thing and get a track, and then they'd keep they'd have the guitar players overdub, and with the intention that by the time you walked out of there, everything they wanted was on there.
So you'd have an album in a week.
Yeah, well, you'd have the tracking done,
and
they'd sing and mix and stuff. But that was the idea: is that basically you did a song, a session, and all the overdubs and everything, right? So for me, when I got into that, I had adjusted to having all this to getting it right the first time, and having all this kind of first take energy, and realizing that I needed to find a way to bring that to the picnic every time, because now we were going to spend an hour or an hour and a half working out the details of this tune. And, so it was a really interesting process of learning to, it's not really pacing yourself, because you want to bring that every time,
Yeah, of course.
But it's the first couple times I did that, I was thinking, wow, we're still working on this, and I just killed it. But we're not going to keep a track for another 45 minutes or something. It's like it was really an adjustment, because we, in the demo world, we get so locked into getting it right.
Sure, yeah, for sure.
I love playing a chart of a song I just heard and being a little scared of it, and just standing out on the edge and going for it, and then trying to access that energy and bring it every time. All of us that do this develop such a quick learning curve that after 1 or 2 times through, the song's not unfamiliar to you anymore. Your brain has processed it, and so it's hard to approach it like you're not sure what's going to happen, or something that you spontaneously did that you go to recreate is no longer spontaneous. So it's, all of that is part of the skill set of a studio musician, a skill set I'm really proud of in my contemporaries. I mean, what a gifted, and to that point, we're not better musicians. It's not that. I go and record other places in the country. Musicians are great. We just have way more experience recording.
I think I think the efficiency quotient is probably higher in Nashville.
Yeah, and the skill set around recording. Like about how you approach these things. Literally thousands of hours of being recorded. So. And the communication and all of that. So it's just, that's what the deal is there really is a sort of a common language and a common system here, and it's incredibly efficient. And I remember when Larry Carlton first moved to town, I was doing some sessions with the drummer that was playing with him, and he would come to the sessions and bring these guys from L.A. I didn't know, but I was familiar with who they were. And he'd go, watch this, they're going to get like 3 songs in 3 hours. Larry Carlton is fascinated by this, and I'm thinking, we're all fascinated with you.
Right.
But he's like, wow, how do you guys know what the other guys do? It's just, it really is an amazing thing that goes on down here, and still, and there's this whole younger generation of guys, most of whom are the sons of my contemporaries, that are coming in and they are the next generation of this. It's really cool to see, I think this is the only place really left in the world where this goes on consistently like this.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. When I was in town about 2 or 3 weeks ago, Rob McNally he and I got kind of friendly after, this, and he was kind enough to invite me to a session, a 6 to 9 session, a demo session.
That's great. Yeah.
Man, it was so... what an honor and a privilege it was to watch that. It was everything you're saying. And and then in the back of my mind, back to Jerry's interview, once I asked Jerry a question, said, what do you dislike most about what you do? And he goes, well, song triage. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, sometimes a song comes in, is dead on the stretcher, and we have to breathe, we have to bring it to life. And he goes, it's difficult, and it's not particularly fun. And what I was amazed at, so there were 5 songs, like you said, 3 hours, 5 songs. And, one of the songs was kind of I'm not a songwriter, but I just from listening to music for 50 years, I was like, that's probably one of them. And it was amazing that these guys did something. But there was a side of me, the business side of me, that said, God, this is all wrong. These guys are writing the fucking song. They're not getting any credit.
Yeah, and that's a gray area. I mean, a lot of that we sort of accept going in, but there are circumstances there, and especially with the guitar players and the keyboard players, where I see them, like write a hook for the guy's tune, like write an intro lick that becomes this really integral part of the song, and that's expected.
I know it's part of the job. I totally get it, and if I was there, I wouldn't be having I wouldn't have a chip on my shoulder about it. But as an outsider looking in, I'm like, this is. I mean, shit. I might as well go in there with a song. I'm not even right. You know what I was saying is what I meant is that anybody could go in there. You got the right session guys. You can get a song, and you might have a hit. Yeah,
I think there's a little more to it than that, but we could make you a thing that might fool you into thinking it sounded like a hit for a minute. You still got to have, it still has to have some melody and some lyric content that talks to somebody, and there is something to that. And my guess would be even the song you're referring to on that session still had that.
It had something, but it was, you could tell it wasn't that, it was not likely to go further than that. I mean, I hope it does for the person, but it was just amazing that the efficiency. I mean, to me, that's the best bang for your buck. If you're going to spend money on anything, that's as a songwriter or a producer, that's where your money's best spent. Paying a bunch of guys who are incredibly talented.
Yeah. And even coming from outside the market, I mean, like, someone who lives down where you did, even factoring in an airline ticket and a couple nights in a hotel, you'd get so much more per dollar by bringing it here, and I mean, there's some thought I know out in the world that this is cookie cutter and so forth, but that's just because people haven't been here. Rob McNally's a great example, but I mean, all of these guys I work with, and hopefully myself as well, we've all got such a wide bag. We've all played so many different styles over the years, particularly being studio musicians, that, this is not a one-trick pony down here. You can get it pretty much however you want. The community musicians here is so versatile and so good at things, and we can even play to sound like we're not very good if that's what you want.
Well, there was like just that night in the sessions, there's like 3 or 4 different genres. So, but what, referencing what you just said, man, I had a thought in my head and it was relevant to what you just said and it just popped out. As far as a bang for your buck, anyway, I can't think of it. It was just an incredible value. I just think, and this is what it was. What amazed me, then there's guys going in, some of the songwriters, and they're asking the guys in the room, not the musicians. They have I like this line. Should we use it? Should we not use it? And again, I'm just sitting there learning, and I'm thinking, man, if I got these guys in the room, why would you not ask them if this is like, I don't know, you got the experts there. I mean, these guys, right? At least they came up with it. Then you're saying to change it. Why don't you ask them what you think? I don't know. Maybe, I'm a firm believer. You pay experts for expert knowledge.
Sure. And part of that is because your first foray into this thing wasn't as a musician, I mean, you've been a business guy all your life, and this is a very unbusiness-like business in that sense, because I agree with what you're saying. It makes so much empirical sense, but this is a creative thing. It's so, part of my job through all of this, I've led a lot of sessions and produced a lot of records, and I don't want to sound like Pollyanna here, but I really love these people, and I love doing this, and I'll give you a great Hal Blaine quote here in a minute, but however they get to it. So a lot of our job is to understand what they're saying and try to give it to them, because the language, so some of the most gifted writers I've worked with are not musicians. and some of the most gifted musicians I've worked with who are not the best writers, and then everything in between, you know. But the creative guy that's trying to get it out to you that what it is he's going for, you know, and they'll often use terminology that means one thing to us, but they mean something different by it. And, you know, to me, that's an obstacle I want to overcome. I'm not, if the guy says eighth notes and he means quarter notes, I don't feel the need to correct him. I just want to understand what he wants
I get
and
that.
try to give it to him. So very quickly, you know who Hal Blaine is?
No, I don't.
Hal Blaine's probably the most recorded drummer, or maybe the most recorded musician in history. He was the drummer of the Wrecking Crew in L.A.
Oh, wow.
Played on Beach Boys record, every record. John Robinson, the drummer, said he went to a Hal Blaine drum clinic once, and when he left, he was excited, but he was bummed because he found out his 5 favorite drummers were Hal Blaine. You know? I mean, he played on everything. You know, I thought there was a guy in the Grassroots. I thought Karen Carpenter played drums, but Hal Blaine played on everything. He played on MacArthur. I think he's the most recorded guy. Anyway, He moved to Phoenix late in his career, and I'd worked with him a lot, and he was the guy that encouraged me to move down here. But I was working in the studio in Phoenix with Hal, and I was having a really bad day. I didn't like the guy we were working for. I thought he was an idiot. I had a pretty big chip on my shoulder about it. And Hal sensed this and kind of pulled me aside, and he said, what's wrong? I said, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, and he's telling me this, and I do what he tells me, and then he's bugged because that's not what he meant. And plus I think he's a fool. And, he really wants somebody else here. And Hal took me by the shoulders and he said, listen, I have replaced every famous drummer that you can think of on a record. And then he said, I also have been replaced by every famous drummer you can think of on a record. And he said, here's the deal, man. And this was so 60s lingo, and he's such a hero of mine. But dead in the eyes, he said to me, here's the deal. You're the cat on the date. And it was like the heavens opened up.
Yeah.
He said, it's your job to look this guy in the eye, figure out what he wants, and try to give it to him with love in your heart, And if you don't like this guy, next time he calls you, tell him you're busy. Say no, but you said yes today. So your job is not to fight with him. Your job is to try to understand what he wants and give it to him. And you're cheating yourself if you don't, if you're playing music when you're angry, So, but you're the cat on the date, man. I should make T-shirts. I mean, if you don't know anything else about being a session musician, that speaks volumes. And in my experience down here, I have had the same thing. I've gone in and replaced bass tracks, and sat there wondering, why am I doing this? This is great. And I'm sure I've been replaced, it's, you do your work and you leave, and then it's not up to you anymore,
Sure.
And I was, Hal said to me, he said, look, you have this extra thing that makes for a great session musician. You do a lot of recording here, but you don't make records, and you should go somewhere they make records, because that's a different level, And I thought, well, wow, if he thinks so,
listen,
maybe I should think so.
Yeah.
But that really, I'm telling you, Craig, that was just one of the big knock you in the head moments for me. Yeah.
And how old were you at the time when he told you that?
Oh, mid-20s, late 20s, something like that.
Man, so you got to give yourself a pat on the back for being mid-20s and being open enough to hear the message too.
Well, and it was from God himself.
Yeah, but still, mid-20s, that's,
that really turned the light on for me,
that's cool, man.
And it is the sense, I'm not going to win every time.
Right.
But it's my intention every single time to help this guy, this person who's employing me, whether it's the producer or the writer or both of them or the artist or whatever, to understand and then try to give them what they want beyond their expectation if I can. So we get done and the guy goes, well, it's even better. And I thought it would be, that's a win for me.
Right, right.
And that's what's kept me happening.
Right, right. It's like in the business world, we would have said, hey, listen, you're in the service business. You got to provide great service. So I totally get that, man. That was a really cool message.
And we are in a service industry.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's exactly what we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure, man.
Yeah.
Hey, I just want to take a break for a second and tell everybody that
Sure.
I didn't say this, but this is a first. This is a father-son. Mark Prentice is John Prentice's dad, and I interviewed John Prentice in episode 61, if you want to go back and check that. So this is a first, man. I've done brothers.
Wow.
I've done 2 sets of brothers, about to do a third, I think, soon, and then father-son. This is a first.
Oh, that's great.
Talk about your experience working with Felix, because I know you've done a lot of work with him.
I have. So I'm going to tell you, this is my musician story. I grew up in upstate New York, and I think I had just turned 13. Yeah, I had. And the Young Rascals played at the high school, Watertown High, and I owned a guitar. I think I played a little bit. I might even have been in a little band. I don't remember. Anyway, I went to see that, and the choice I had, by the way, that night was to either go there or to go see Ronnie Dio.
Oh, wow. Ronnie James Dio?
From Cortland, New York. Oh, yeah. He wasn't Ronnie James Dio then. No, it was Ronnie Dio and the Prophets. They were the best top 40 band I ever heard. I've heard Ronnie Dio sing Yummy, Yummy, Yummy. I got love in my
You're
tummy.
kidding me. That is hilarious.
No, yeah.
And he was
Ronnie
Wait a minute.
Padavana. He had, there's a record you can find, Dio at the Domino's singing Smoke Gets in Your Eyes and stuff. Just a great singer and a great guy.
And he was from Cortland.
Cortland, New York.
I didn't
Cortland,
know that.
Ithaca.
That's so fun. I never knew that. I thought he was from the UK.
No. And that whole...
That's hilarious.
The entire genesis of that was that band quickly eventually became called the Electric Elves, and then they were called the Elves, because Ronnie and the guitar player were like 4'11". They were little guys, and big men, little guys. They ended up opening for Deep Purple,
right?
And it was right at the time that Blackmore left the band, and he hired the Elves to be the first Rainbow. The first Rainbow record is that entire group, and then he quickly jettisoned them and kept Ronnie. But that's where Ronnie became Ronnie
record.
James Dio, and yeah. But no, Ronnie,
that's
super
cool.
good guy. Anyways, I had to make this choice to see, because like the Prophets was like $1, and I think the Rascals was like $5, and a lot of money. So anyway, I went to see the Rascals. And it was this is not revisionist history, because I've told this story my whole life. That was the life-changing moment for me. It was when I saw the Rascals and I went, I'm sure at my age I didn't really know what that was, but I knew that's what I wanted to do. I totally knew that's what I wanted to do. Right. So, and in my neck of the woods, like, we didn't like the Beach Boys because we liked the Rascals. Like, those are these guys in goofy striped shirts and surfboards.
Well, it was West Coast, East Coast.
We were macho and, all of that kind of thing. Anyway, so that really was that was the thing that made me just dig in deep, And so all these years later, I was in a recording session one day, and somebody said to me, because none of us went on the road like in the 90s. We were all so busy here. We didn't want to. You don't want to not be around. We were booked 2 and 3 sessions a day. You don't want to mess with that.
Oh, hell no! Yeah, and you're working
in your own bed, great dough.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So somebody said to me, you think you'd ever tour? Somebody had called me to go, and I didn't. And one of the other guys I was playing with said, "You think you'd ever go on tour again?" And I said, "Nah, I don't think so." I said, "I'll tell you what. If Felix Cavaliere called me and it was mostly weekends and fly dates, I'd do that." Like a week later, my buddy George Marinelli, who plays guitar with Bonnie Raitt, who was playing with Felix at the time, called me and said, "Hey, would you be willing to do some Felix dates?" I mean, seriously.
Holy crap.
Yeah. Unbelievable.
Talk about putting something out into the universe and getting a response.
Whiz, I wish I knew I was that good.
Yeah,
I should
right.
have bought a lottery ticket that day. But and so I have this moment, where Felix calls me and says, "Hey, I got these couple of dates, you want to do them?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Should I send you like a tape or something?" And I said, "Man, if I don't know these songs, you should fire my sorry white ass."
Yeah, man.
Right. And he goes, "Okay, I'll see you in Florida." I mean, that was it. That was the rehearsal, right? and I hang the phone up, and my wife looks at me and she goes, "Who are you talking to?" And I said, "Baby, I'm a young rascal." And she said, "You might be a rascal." Anyway, awesome, I went down and started playing with Felix and played with him for 15 years, And actually just had lunch with him yesterday. An unbelievable, one of the iconic voices of all time. I mean, man. And still to this day, all the songs in the original keys, sings. It's stunning. And this is a guy that. So what he was to me, Ray Charles and Jimmy Smith were to him.
Gotcha.
It's the same kind of thing. So yeah, but that morphed into all of these other things, but including, ending up music directing and playing with this Once Upon a Dream thing, where the original Rascals came back and played together for the first time in 45 years or something. And I remember, because we did like 5 weeks at the Richard Rodgers on Broadway and sold it out, and it was crazy. It was a dream for me. But I remember thinking, wow, in February of 1967 or whatever that was, the odds that I would ever meet these guys, much less play with them and be the only guy really that ever played bass with all of them, because they were like an organ trio, with a singer live. They were bass players on the records, but all of that probably only important to me. But what a thrill to come full circle like that with your heroes, and I've gotten a chance to play with a lot of guys like that. It's been pretty wild, but that's how that all came about, and have had it. And the thing, in the course of working with Felix, we've done a couple records together, and he produced a couple things, and one of those was a thing that, eventually had Joe Bonamassa and Billy Preston and Sam Moore and all these guys on this record. Unbelievable, man. Unbelievable.
That's awesome. That's a fantastic story, man.
Yeah, it's true too. How about that? Well, I've got a lot of stories. I got great stories that aren't, but I bet. Yeah.
Did Mike Sievers play out on those dates? Was he in the studio with you?
No, I actually got. So this George Marinelli, who, by the way, is somebody you'd probably want to talk to. He's a tremendous guitar player. He was in Bruce Hornsby in the Range. He's been with Bonnie for years, and just a brilliant player and a fellow clown. He's a great guy. He did that for a little bit, and then he had kind of sort of stayed in town because his son was a certain age, and then he went back with Bonnie, and I recommended Mike, and we did that together for all these years.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, he's an old and dear friend and a fantastic, versatile musician. And all of the other qualities I'm talking to you about, this is a pro that shows up prepared with the right attitude, and everybody loves him.
Very good guy.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you just one more, because we can literally stay here for like 6-7 hours. Bruce Springsteen.
Well, okay, so that came about as a result of this Rascals reunion thing, and very quickly, so the Rascals reunion thing was at the end of 2012 and all through 2013, but I think it was 2010, I was out playing on the weekend with Felix, and he mentioned on the way back to the hotel, he said, "Yeah, I'm going up to New York next week. I guess I'm gonna play with the guys," and went right over my head. I didn't think about it, and then we got to the hotel, and I went, "What guys?" He said, "Oh, Van Zant's got, all of the guys." I said, "The four of you?" And he said, yeah, because like with all bands, you could talk to each of the four of them. I mean, there's good and bands, rock and roll bands, man. Timmy Schmidt in that Eagles thing said, "In my experience, every rock and roll band is right on the edge of breaking up, and that's kind of the way it is." But anyway, he said, "Yeah, we're gonna do this charity thing that involved a cancer charity that was Springsteen's accountant's daughter, or some big cancer charity that the Springsteen gang does every year." And Van Zant was the honoree that year. And anyway, he had done. He prevailed upon Felix at the last moment to come do this thing, and I think Felix agreed. So this is like Saturday, and Sunday night, I get this phone message from Steven going, "Hey, what are you doing next week?"
Wow, very cool.
Because and I think what was going to happen there is I think Will Lee was going to do it, and he couldn't. He had something going on that weekend or whatever. So I go up on Wednesday, and I walk in and meet all these guys for the first time. And we rehearsed for 3 days at SIR and played Saturday night. And of course, these guys are my heroes, and I bonded with them immediately and hung out with Dino and Gene quite a bit after rehearsal, just yakking and going over things and stuff. And it was great. So we played this one-off gig.
This is up in New York?
This is so I'm going to tell you all of this because you'll totally get this. So it was at the Tribeca Grill, which is De Niro's place.
Yeah, I know exactly where that is. Sure.
So we go in, and so this was this high dollar, charity, whatever thing. And, this is an upstairs, like in the banquet room. And once you get the gear in there, you can maybe crowd 200 people in there. It's not huge, obviously. But word of this thing got out, so there's a crowd in the street. And there's, because in New York, this is the Beatles reunion. I mean, this is a big deal, you know.
Very much.
So that entire experience in that place was just whack. So we do the sound check, and I'm putting my guitar in the stand, and from behind me, this guy says, "Oh man, what's it like to play with the Rascals?" And I turn around, it's Bill Murray.
How cool is that?
I said, "What's it like to be Bill Murray?" He goes, "I've been Bill Murray all my life. Tell me what it's like." Then the girl comes and gets us and says, "Okay, we're gonna take." And Paul Schaefer was on the thing. Take Paul and me. We go over, and she says, "We're gonna let you use Bobby's studio." Bobby De Niro. Yeah, for the green room, which is his screening room for the Tribeca Film Festival. It's like,
wow.
It's like it's not some little room in your house. It's like a movie theater,
That's so
with probably
cool.
I don't know, it's like 70 seats in it or something. It's big. It's a movie theater, She comes in and she says, "The only thing we ask is, like, please don't bring any food or drinks in here." Obviously, everything's beautiful, right?
Yeah.
We're not in there 90 seconds, and in comes the chef with all kind of food and drinks. Then, like 30, a minute after that, Richard Belzer walks in with his dog. And I'm thinking, man, the food and drinks aren't going to be a problem if that dog's in there long enough,
I've seen him.
So anyway, this night just went crazy. The whole room was filled with people that, of big name stars and I go to take a leak, and I'm standing next to Paulie Walnuts, and it's just
so
all the Sopranos guys were there. Which, by the way, I would be surprised if there was any wardrobe for that show, because that's just how those guys dress. I mean,
really?
Oh yeah, greatest guys in the world. Met them all.
That's hilarious.
Just what a magic night, But we're doing all this, and so as we're playing, Springsteen comes up and plays "Good Lovin' and Something Else" with us. So I've got this video of hanging out with him and saw him when we did the tour too, but that was just a trip. I'm up there playing "Good Lovin' with Springsteen.
Bruce
Springsteen.
It's
just
good for you. Yeah, man. What a nice.
Who's very down to earth and very accessible, and if I have many failings, but one of my big ones is I should have taken a lot more pictures with people, but I just feel funny about that. I've watched it go down so much that I don't want to be that guy, so.
Well, it comes off too as like, are you there for the photo op or, and it's, I totally get that, man.
Right.
I totally
And
get
I was
that.
I was a support player in this thing, thrilled to be part of it, but that's not, I wasn't there to like push my way to the front of the line and get a picture with the boss.
No, I totally get that.
I should do that more, though. I mean, I should. The self-promotion angle handled correctly is an important part of this, and I think myself and a lot of musicians sort of downplay that to your own detriment.
Yeah, I would agree with that. In fact, most of the times you're pretty comfortable talking about projects that you're in, as we talked beforehand. But most of the time, the reason I always say, "Do you want to do that?" At the end of these calls, I want people to tell the audience, listeners, how can they get turned on? And most of them would prefer I do it. And I'm totally happy to do that because I'm thrilled to, you spend your time with me. I would be thrilled if I could somehow put eyes, ears, and dollar bills in your way. I'm thrilled. And I'm a sales guy, so I'm totally good with that. But almost all musicians are uncomfortable with that.
Yeah.
It's almost like a sacrilegious thing too, in some ways. For some people.
But that's unfortunate because it's counterproductive.
Oh, you're talking to a salesperson. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Nothing gets bought unless it gets sold first.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the truth of it. And you know, you can sell with dignity and class, but, you know.
Well, and the truth is we're all doing that all the time anyway. If you know, I'll reference the recording session that you attended. I wasn't there, but I guarantee that each guy brought his personality to the picnic in that in a way that would make whoever the client was want to hire those guys back, want to have them around, want them to do it. We're all doing it all the time. We just don't acknowledge that that's what it is, you know. So we've made, you know, selling like a dirty word or you know, the perception of that thing, and that's not right. You know, that's crazy. If we're in business, we're in business.
Yeah, and see, the comfort level is selling through your art, but when it gets past that, that's where my observation, that's where the discomfort comes in. It's almost like, well, and I think there's some leftover, and it's really unfortunate because it's undeserving. There's leftover vestiges of the suffering musician.
Sure.
You know, we are supposed. That's bullshit. No one's supposed to suffer.
Well, I'm not.
Suffering's optional.
At this point in my life. Yeah.
Suffering is fucking optional. No, it's the truth. That's the truth. But I think there's much of that, you know, in the atmosphere of people's minds.
Sure.
You know, which is very unfortunate because, you know, you deserve to get paid well because you're doing a great service. So.
Yeah, you know. No, and I agree, and that all comes to, we'll talk about this more about this thing I'm going to do in the future, but that is a thing I've imparted to my kids, and they've been very successful because they understand it. You know, at a very early age, they've worked their way through the scene in a very dignified and professional way, but people know who they are, and they get hired all the time, you know, because they have understood how to brand themselves and get out there and do their thing. You know?
Well, let me tell you a funny story about John. So I interviewed John, and I said, we were talking, and I said something about, I think he said I think he might have said he's shy, and I said, that's surprising because you're so open. And he goes, oh, I'm talking about myself, man. I love talking about myself. And it was like very, you know, he's my kid, younger than my kids. I'm like, you know, I looked at it like, Dad, it was a very cute thing, you know, but he was totally appropriate. You know, he should be. You need to be talking about yourself if you want to, you know, who else, you know, if you're not talking about you and you're waiting for the rest of the world, man, it's going to be a long wait. Yeah. You know? So he's got it. He definitely gets it.
Right.
You talked about being from upstate New York. You're from Watertown, you said? Watertown. Mm-hmm. What was your childhood like?
Well, it was, you know, it was pretty storybook, man. You know, I had parents that were great people that were in love with each other, real stable home life. Watertown was a very nice small town to grow up in. Lot of winter, but you grow up with that, and it's fantastic. Snowmobiles and skiing and skating, and you know, you know, I really, it's you know, the scene in Jaws where they're comparing scars, and like Roy Scheider has an appendix scar, and that's it. He's got nothing. He's like looks at it and doesn't even add it to the conversation. I sometimes feel like that when I'm talking with friends about what their childhood and their home lives were like, because I just didn't understand that many people's were not good.
Yeah,
mine was great. Mine was great, you know, and I my dad was an amazing guy, and you know, I really, you know, the older I get, the more I understand. I just grew up with this really solid foundation, you know, and he and my mom were Depression era, World War II people that both their families tanked in the Depression. I mean, they had a rough go, you know, but I never heard about any of that. And all I ever got from my father was possibility. You know, he was a total self-made guy, entrepreneur, ended up owning a large trucking company, had worked for them in sales and found a way to buy it when they wanted to sell it, found, you know, investors and did all that. Started the Car Freshener Corporation, little Christmas trees in your car and stuff. You
know, was your dad started that company?
He started that, yeah. He didn't stay with it very long. Yeah. I'll tell you that whole story someday but a very interesting guy. And, you know, my memory is that, you know, he'd come in the morning and flash the light in my room, and I'd wake up and he'd say, let's get up and attack the day. You know, I mean, that's the message I got, you know, is there's nothing you can't do and go for it. And, you know, he's a very sensible guy. I mean, he wasn't, you know, he took calculated risks. He wasn't recommending that you go jump off a cliff without a parachute or anything, but
That's great.
He was not, he very early on, I remember him saying, don't, your life isn't going to be about learning how to not fall down. It's going to be learning how to hit and roll and get up and dust yourself off and keep going with minimum damage, learn
That's
something
great.
from it, keep working, Yeah, it is great. I'm incredibly lucky in that way. And I'm not, I'm not putting a brave face on this. I had a great childhood, and really I've had an unbelievable life, honestly. And I think partly because he sort of burned my chip to think that, it's hard for me to stay down for very long, because when I reset, I just think everything's going to be all right. That's the message I got at an important time, I guess.
That's fantastic. You have brothers or sisters?
I have an older sister. Mm-hmm.
Is she in music at all, or?
No. Well, yeah, I think she's and her husband sing in a couple of choral groups and travel doing that and enjoy that. But it's an amateur thing for her.
Sure.
It's never been her livelihood. Yeah.
So how did music come into your life on a playing level?
Well, my mom was a piano player, and her mother had played like for the silent movies and stuff. My mom has these great memories.
Wow.
Sitting next to her mother playing for the silent movies and playing for church and all this stuff. And so there was music in our house, and my dad, sang like in the church choir or whatever, but there were people that liked music, and they took us to New York every year, like at Easter time, I guess. And so, I saw My Fair Lady in Oklahoma and Sound of Music and things on Broadway. And I remember going to like a Victor Borge concert, but music was kind of part of our thing.
Yeah.
They weren't professional musicians, and it wasn't like forced on us, but there was like, a piano in the house and this and that. And so I think, my sister had the first Beatle records and stuff, and I think that's like every other kid, everybody wanted a guitar, right? And I did buy one and kind of started to figure out some things and took a few lessons, and I just had an affinity for it. I had some innate musical talent, and I became really, like I said, the thing with the Rascals really pushed my button, man. It wasn't, part of that was music, part of it was the visual, part of it was the vibe, just that thing really, really nailed me at a really impressionable time. And I just started applying myself to it. And the more I did it, the more things I discovered. And, like you said, and my son was like this, you couldn't get a guitar out of my hands, and if there was, keyboard laying around, I was figuring that out. And and very early on, kind of realized that I was the guy that was the most serious about the band, and that kind of stuff, even in these kid groups, but yeah, that was, and it really never, by the time I was a junior in high school, I was probably making more money than the teachers, and by the time I was a senior, I was playing 5 and 6 nights a week. And
that's fantastic.
And with older guys that really, again, these, older by like 2 or 3 years, but these guys hired me right before I was 15 that were all seniors in high school, and they were playing all the time. And that guy, the elder statesman there, the Sicilian kid named Al Netto, who's still a dear friend of mine, man, he just plugged me in right away. He was a great business guy, self-made guy. He showed me, well, they didn't show it to me. He laid down a law for me about what was expected in terms of preparation and punctuality, and and it was unforgiving. He was like an older brother that was going to kick my ass if I didn't get it right, and I've told him several times that, look, man, you really, I've had this amazing life, and I credit a lot of that to you. And he's very modest about it, but it really did. It really got me started right, and I when I talked to some of these young cats, I had a friend that taught music business here, and she'd have me come speak to them every year, and I'd say, look, if you can show up early, be sober, and wear a clean shirt, you're ahead of 98% of the field. If you can just get that right, And I got all that from him. It was like he was my best buddy, except on the gig. You leave your problems at the front door. You show up, if you're not early, you're late. All of these skills that, or habits that have really served me well, throughout my whole career. It's kind of that simple in some ways.
It sounds like, too, you had some intersection with some really good mentors between your dad and this guy, Al, and that Hal Blaine. And it sounds like you had, good counsel, and then you were open enough to listening to that counsel and implementing, which is obviously.
I could tell you half a dozen other people, too, like that. I've had these great people show up in my life, and I'm just glad I was smart enough to hear it.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, there's something to be said about that, because people get advice all day long, and most people don't listen to it, and then of course, even if they listen to it, they don't implement it, which is the critical thing. Mark, everybody pays tuition in our careers, and I was wondering if you'd be kind enough to maybe share one or two mistakes you made along your journey, and what were the lessons you might have learned from those mistakes.
Yeah, sure. I had an opportunity when I was 17. I got hired by these guys from Syracuse that were all, 10 or 12 years older than me. They had the most happening band in Central New York, and a lot of things happening for that in New York City. And interest in Elliot Shiner, who nobody really knew at that time, but he was interested. He top engineered all Steely Dan stuff, but he was interested in maybe producing us. And the guy that was Bobby Fischer's lawyer was interested in getting into music. And I mean, it was a pretty big opportunity, especially from Watertown, where it was a limited number of things to do up there. And they sought me out. It was huge to be invited into this band as they reworked the direction of it. And they really ran that like a business. I mean, it was a corporation. They had funds set aside for rehearsals. They really, I'd never been in anything like that. This was in like 70, I don't know, 1, I guess, or 2. And we had, truck and roadies, and, it was a regional act. It wasn't a local act, and it was big, and it was a happening thing. And all the way through that process, that we'd make these decisions about what we were going to do with the band, and they would ask, for my input. And there were a lot of times when I wasn't feeling what I was a little reticent about what they were talking about, but I figured these guys know what they're doing and I don't, and I never said anything. And deeper into this experience, I suddenly found myself like really freaking out and uncomfortable, and I quit the band. And the guy, said to me, he said, "Look, we solicited your input every step of the way, and you never said anything." And I did. I really screwed these guys. I mean, they had put all this effort in and really believed in me. And, less than a year into it, I just kind of felt overwhelmed and panicked and bolted. I just couldn't, I had to get out, and I'm really good friends with these guys to this day. But I learned a lot from that experience, because this guy landed all over me, and he was right. I couldn't argue. So the thing I learned from that is, depending on your circumstance, if you're a member of something like that, or if you're involved in the ramifications of these decisions, you got to speak up, even if it's uncomfortable. The guy that was sort of laying down the law is a very forceful character, but through that experience, so am I. And, again, with my sons, I've talked to them about that. It's like when somebody asks you, depending on the circumstance, I mean, when you're a sideman, some of that, you just accept that, or you find another gig, But when you're in a situation,
if you're getting asked, that's a different story.
Yeah. But if there's something you're feeling and it's important to address it, and address it frankly. Address it, be sure you're understood, but don't address it with a chip on your shoulder, but just put it out there on the table. And whatever comes from that's going to be the right thing. Like, if there's an adjustment made, great. If you're not the right guy for that thing, there's another thing. But don't do this to yourself, and don't do it to the other people that, but your silence is actually penalizing them.
Yes.
If they're asking for your input. So, I mean, that was just a real, I felt terrible about that whole thing. I went back to Watertown where I could pick up but I felt like a failure. I mean, I had this massive thing and I bolted on it. And I, I had never felt any of those things to that point in my life. I'd never been like overwhelmed and kind of freaked out and scared and weirded, but it was going so fast for me. It was like from where I had been in my little town. And,
Sure.
Again, these guys were 28, 30 years old. That's radically different from being a 17-year-old.
No,
And
but didn't have the coping skills.
But they really did solicit, they really supported and solicited that all the way. That was all on me. I mean, it wasn't like I threw my opinion out there one time and they jumped all over me and I never wanted to do it again. I really stepped in it. I really dropped the ball on that deal. And it was a humbling experience. It was a big comeuppance, but I learned a lot about how important it is. And, the way that has kind of manifested itself into my future stuff is like when I have done big tours or production projects or anything like that, my mantra is let's work all of the details out on the front end, you don't need any back end surprises. Let's address all of the things that everybody's uncomfortable addressing. Let's just get it all done. If we're going to argue, if we're going to have weird feelings, let's get that all out up front. Let's not just go along to get along and then get into this thing and have these things come up. So, let's get that together. Let's get it in writing so we got some kind of deal memo and everybody remembers what we talked about. And, all of those things came from that for me, and I would much rather address the uncomfortable stuff on the front end.
No, you have to. Yeah, that's good. It was a great experience for you, it sounded like.
Yeah, it really was, Yeah.
In your quote disappointment or in your perception of failure, which is everybody's, that tuition sucks.
Well, sure, but it's the only way you get better. I mean, and again, my dad was all about failure. I mean, he told me, he said, look, the reason I've been a success is because I've failed. Michael Jordan had a similar quote.
Yeah.
Yep. That's pro ball. If you fail 70% of the time, you're in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's funny. I literally had this same conversation with my daughter last night. She's going through something. And I said, you're just paying tuition, honey. You know that. She goes, I know, but it sucks. I said, of course it does.
It does.
You're 100% right. I'm not going to argue. You're 100% right, but you're going to get better and you're going to learn from it and everything's going to be okay. Yeah.
Well, she's lucky she's got you to put that slant on it, because a lot of the world just wants to the misery loves company and they want to talk about how unfair everything is and how it all sucks.
Oh, no.
That doesn't help anybody get out of anything. So, what you take, I could have taken that experience, I guess, and never continued with music or whatever. It didn't hit me that way because I guess I had this background of, this really supportive environment of just going, okay, pick yourself up and figure out what you need to learn from this and keep rocking,
Yeah. Very cool. Thank you for sharing that story, man.
Well, and I actually got together with him a year ago. I was up
with the band leader.
With that guy, yeah.
Oh.
We had talked on the phone and stuff, but I had never sat down, and I sat there with him and went through this whole thing and just said, hey, man, I really want to tell you that. And he goes, he said, I sort of vaguely remember that. And he said, I'm not unaware that I was a really domineering guy in those days because you're not the only person I had this experience with. And I said, well, from my end, and I'm not just puffing you because we're sitting here. I mean, from my end, you didn't do anything wrong. I mean, you involved. It was great. It was really.
So
great.
it was like a cleansing for you. You probably.
It was great for me. Yeah. That was. I've had a couple experiences like that where I've kind of finally found a chance to sit down with somebody, bare my soul, and they don't even remember.
Well, you know what? I've done the same thing, and it's the same exact thing. It's amazing. Like all this shit goes on in our own heads, and nobody's thinking about us when they're going to sleep. It's just shit.
Right.
It's in our own. But it feels good to get that off your.
Sure. And I guess I was still learning something from that till I got it out.
Yeah.
And you do that for yourself anyway. Really.
Oh yeah, of course.
Love it. I thought it was cool, but I wouldn't. It was good for me just to get it out of there.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what he feels. It's about you and getting whatever whatever nutty shit is going on in our heads. It's about cleaning that up and then moving on to the next thing. And figuring out what's next to clean up. Yeah, it's really cool, man.
I'm with you.
Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
Is there something on the other side where you did something and you weren't sure of it at the time, but it turned out to be a really big thing? I mean, one thing I'm thinking of is you listening to Hal and moving to Nashville, of course.
Sure.
Have there been other things like that?
Yeah, a lot of things like that, actually. You know, and this is a thing I try to remind myself of, and I've tried to impart to my kids. There were a lot of times that there was just a boldness in it. Like, I didn't think that I shouldn't do something or that I would fail. I just did it, you know. And so there were numerous circumstances like that. For instance, I was thinking about moving to Nashville in the late 80s, and I was down here, and a friend of mine said, Ricky Skaggs is auditioning bass players, right? Well, I don't live here, and I didn't, you know, but it was like the next day, and I called him, the guy, and I said, could I get in on the list? And he said, sure. So I borrowed a bass from my buddy, and I learned, you know, a few of these tunes, because I was just down here on a songwriting trip or whatever, you know, I didn't live here yet. And I went into this audition, and the band was just smoking. This was the on the heels of the Kentucky Thunder record. It was kind of the last big Skaggs electric band. You know, his thing now is just ridiculously good, but it's a straight up bluegrass kind of thing. And this was drums, bass, keys, you know, the bluegrass guys, big band. I don't know, 8 or 9 of us. Anyway, I played through 2 or 3 things. And he said, well, that's really great. Is there anything that you'd like to play with us that you didn't? And I said, yeah, I want to play Country Boy. You know this tune, the Albert Lee thing?
I don't.
It's Speed of Light.
Oh, Country Boy. Yeah, I totally know it. Albert Lee.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's blazing. Holy shit.
And Ricky had a big record of that and played it faster than anyone on the planet. Anyway, he says, is there anything you want to play with us? And I said, yeah, I want to play Country Boy. He goes, wow, you do? He goes, that's the one everybody, because it's even the bass part's fast, you know, and complicated. And he was like, really? He said, most people try to avoid that. And he said, why do you want to do that? And I said, I may never see you guys again. Like, I'm having a ball, you know?
Yeah.
So I did that, and I went back to Nashville. I never thought about it again. And I don't know, a year later, maybe, I get this call on Wednesday afternoon, and it's Skaggs, and he needs somebody to come out for a couple of weeks. Now, there's a town full of bass players here, right?
Holy shit.
And I can't believe they were all busy. So I really think what happened, and I didn't think about it at the time because I was just telling him the truth, but I really have always thought what happened there was he thought, wow, this guy like is enjoying himself. You know what I mean? But I thought, I got nothing to lose here. I don't expect to get this thing. I'm not even sure I want it if I do.
Well, see, you know what? What you just said.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure I want it. And the fact that you actually demonstrated that by you saying to him, hey, I may never see you guys again. I want to have.
Yeah.
There's an appeal of that from a psychology standpoint, because you're not like, look, man, I really want. And it's like, you know, when you go into dating, it's a difference between the woman that you have to work a little bit for and the woman that's so needy and all over you. You know, all things being equal, you're going to kind of be a little more interested in pursuing that one that, you know, that doesn't clearly need you. That's got some mystery, you know, and that was the same thing, I bet.
Well, I would just think as complicated as his life is, you know, a year later to sort of remember, hey, who is that guy that, you know, because literally this town's filled with people that could have gone and done it. And I flew out and played with them for a couple of weeks and got offered the gig and didn't take it because I wasn't ready to make that move. And ultimately it was a great thing because they worked all the time. And my move here was about getting into the studio.
Sure.
And I initially thought, boy, it'd be great to move there with a gig. And then I thought, no, that's not, I won't be there, you know. I'll be gone all the time.
Well, you kept your mission. Your mission was, I want to get studio work, and it's really, I give you credit because it's very easy to look at a paycheck and which is comfortable and safe versus open box, uncomfortable, unsafe. You know, unknown rather, not unsafe. But that's really cool.
Well, I had it going on in Phoenix business-wise. I had a great band. We played 5 nights a week, had a house gig. It was a great music town in the 80s, very lucrative. I had a really active production business, a lot of ad stuff. So the reason to move here was to get in a bigger game in this very specific thing, you know, not to get an artist's road gig, but to get into this. Hal said, you got to go where they make records, you know, and that stuck in my head, and I just thought, yeah, okay, that's the reason to go there,
Yeah.
Not to ride around the country on a tour bus, 40 weeks a year or something. That doesn't matter where I live if I'm doing that,
Yeah.
Not that there's anything in the world wrong with that.
No.
That's not what I was after at that point in my life.
Sure. Yeah. I think I give you credit though, because I don't know if it was maybe having the your dad in the back of your mind and that baseline of thought process. But I really think that it takes a long time and a lot of maturity to figure out what you want and just say, no, I'm going to do this. Whether it's with a relationship with another human being, whether it's a woman or a buddy or a business, I think it takes some discipline and, I need things this way, and that's what I want to focus my effort on.
Well, it's funny you would say that because I'd never thought about it this way, but I think I approached this whole move down here very much like my father would have. Like, I came down here a bunch ahead of time. I started some relationships. I was actually working some sessions here before I lived here, And I just finally hit that place where, like, okay, in or out,
Yeah.
You've done everything you can do from a distance. Now, you either want to get in this or you don't, and now's the time to, Anyway, so
that's really cool.
But I didn't just go, okay, I'm going to drop all my dishes and move to Nashville. I prepared for this move and over a period of a couple years and financially and otherwise, and came down. I wasn't prepared for it, everything you run into, but it was a calculated risk. Yeah, I was pretty sure I could get in the game,
That's
and
good.
I was willing, then I had the reinforcement, I guess, from my upbringing to just go ahead and take a swing at it, so.
Well, then you put your money where your mouth is when you got offered this Ricky Skaggs gig. That is the big, to focus on what you want. That's really cool, I think.
Yeah. I had a couple circumstances like that here, and I'm really glad that I did what I did, because it would have been tempting. It was tempting.
Sure.
You get here and you anyway, good.
I wanted to ask you, Mark, and I didn't ask you last time, what are you working on now that's got you excited?
A couple of things. I've got a project I'm about to do starting right after the holidays with a young female pop artist. Really happening thing. I'd love to tell you her name, but I can't right now. Okay. But that's it's something where I realize I'm going to be able to bring a lot of value to this, but I'm not going to participate as a player. I'm going to bring some young guys into it that are the right guys for this thing. It's in my sort of music director hat. I have these different hats I've gotten to wear over the years, and it's exciting to be around something this. My experience in Nashville has been great because somehow my career has managed to be sort of a mainstream Nashville thing, but really get out on the periphery, Elvis Costello and some of the things we talked about, just different. I've been able to, and this is like totally something that just, again, I'd say fell out of the sky, except it's a referral thing from a friend of somebody that I'd done work for who turned me on to somebody else who turned me on to this guy. And this is a good fit. I'm going to bring a lot of value to it. I'm going to bring some great people to it. We're all going to have a good time. And, but it's, it's a kind of music that I don't create. So it's really going to be fun to get in it and help it come to life the right way.
Awesome. So is this the person who referred you to this project? Did you serve in that same capacity as sort of producer for them, or they just knew you had done that?
Yeah, no, so person A, who I had done this with,
okay,
referred me to a friend of his who's somebody who is really big in, like, I think film or Disney or something. This is person B, who I don't even know. And person B called me on the advice of person A and said, I'd like to turn person C onto you.
Okay, great.
He needs this.
Okay.
And person C is a management guy that was a record label guy in L.A. I didn't know him, but we know a million people. It's the way we live in the smallest community ever.
Sure.
As soon as we got on the horn together, immediate rapport, and this, and that was a thing that I talked to them about nearly a year ago. He was very respectful of my time, told me what he needed. I sent him a proposal about doing that. He called back a couple days later, said, I think they're going to go a different way. I said, great, no worries. And then a couple of weeks ago, it just popped up again. And he said, that this all got kind of put on the back burner. We're going to pick it up again. And you still in? And I went, yeah.
Great.
Met the artist. She's awesome, young, beautiful, young, smart, together young woman. I'm excited to put these guys. I'm really jacked up about it. It's
awesome.
Yeah, it's going to be really, really fun. And I think a couple of record production things coming right after the first of the year too, with that I'm pretty excited about. But I'm going to not drop any names for fear of jinxing myself.
No, I hear you, man.
Yeah, Elvis told me to not drop names quite so much. Anyway.
Hey, I'm not a bass, sometimes you talk about gear, and I don't know much about basses, but
right.
I want to ask you a couple of questions. Really,
sure.
One is, do you have any cool or interesting stories behind how you acquired any of your gear, your basses?
Boy, do I. Yep, I sure do. I have first of all, I'll tell you that the thing that turned me on to all of this was, I got into the rock and roll thing. So I was like everybody else, like a big Zeppelin fan. And I was a guitar player, big into Ritchie Blackmore. And, this is the time I came of age and all that. But when I was, this band that hired me when I was, just before I was 15, needed a bass player. So I wanted the gig. Long story, I'll tell you sometime. But anyways, I cajoled the dough out of my dad and went down and bought an EBO, a Gibson EBO, which is actually just a terrible guitar. But I was so thrilled about it. I couldn't, Gibson was never famous for basses, and apologies to my friends at Gibson because I've got a couple now that I like. But anyway, and like a dual showman or something, and went home and just learned all these guys' songs in a week. Just played till I figured them out, and went and played with these guys. Are all seniors in high school, and so they were like working gigs for money and stuff. And so that when I got into that, I started to notice, because they were playing all the pop stuff and all the kind of R&B stuff, and I started noticing, all these great bass lines, which all turn out to pretty much be either James Jamerson or Duck Dunn or Tommy Cogbill or David Hood or something. It's
sure.
all
the usual suspects.
Four guys played all this stuff. But I noticed pretty quickly that John Paul Jones was bringing that R&B Motown thing to the rock and roll deal. I mean, really, he was a in my humble opinion, a much bigger part of Zeppelin than he gets a lot of credit for.
I agree with you.
A really accomplished musician and arranger and so forth, and what he brought to the bass chair in that band was fantastic. And then I don't know that this is his influence, but in revisiting those records when my son got interested in all this stuff and having a memory of what those sound like and then listening to what they actually sound like, Zeppelin was like way more in tune than almost any band of that time, because we didn't have the same. We had a much larger tuning tolerance in those days. Nobody had guitar tuners. What we considered to be in tune or in time was one thing then. It's different now. But they were, anyways, I think he brought a lot to that, and I'm getting off the path. So anyway, but the whole, so that thing was my deal. And once I discovered who James Jamerson was and so on and so forth, I mean, I think he really wrote the book on how all pop music is played, I mean, to this day. And I think most of the guys that would tell you, I mean, Chuck Rainey told me that himself. I'm not dropping any names, but I did. No, he's an awesome guy. And I had this great breakfast with him 10 or 12 years ago. And he was friends with Jamerson and told me a lot about that I wouldn't have known. And that a lot of people don't, just personal stuff. But even Chuck said, he said, I'm a contemporary and everything else. But, when I look back at what his influence was on all this, it's just really pretty stunning. And that, is the early 60s Fender P-Bass. That's the deal, And I don't know which is the chicken and the egg. I don't know if we love that sound because it was on all the records we liked, or if Leo just really got it that right, which is kind of my suspicion, even though he couldn't play or tune a guitar. And he just invented what the scale for the bass should be and everything else.
Amazing.
So I had this friend, a guy named Ed Black, and Ed was steel player, guitar player in Linda Ronstadt's first band, played the steel solo on Silver Threads and the guitar lick on You're No Good, and then left her group. Oh yeah, and then left her group to play with Graham Parsons and played steel on the Dwight Yoakam records and all this stuff. And Eddie moved back to Phoenix, and he and I became really fast friends and worked together a lot. And he was also a a leather tooler of great renown. He did all this tooled leather for Chris Hillman's Harley and all his people's tour buses and stuff. So he had a surf band over there called the Eddies, where he had done like a Telecaster and a Telecaster bass and a Stratocaster covered in leather, kind of like the Waylon Jennings guitars, you know.
Yeah.
So Eddie, and I'd seen pictures of that and stuff. So very unfortunately and very quickly, Eddie got a cancer thing and he passed away. And the guy who was the executor of his estate, another musician I knew from there, I was living in Nashville, but he called me, he said, Ed left you a bass in his will. Do you want me to send it to you?
Wow.
And I presumed it was this Telecaster bass with all the black leather Waylon thing on it. And I would have loved to have had that, you know, but those look great, but they don't sound great. And I was going to Phoenix in a couple months anyway, because my wife, family's out there and stuff. And I said, I'll just pick it up when I'm out there. He said, great. So I go over to his house, and he goes in the closet and pulls out this brown Tolex case, and there is an all-original, perfect 1960 precision bass in there that I never even knew Eddie owned.
Wow. Yeah.
With a tooled leather strap that he made with the date in it, like from 1980 or 81 or something. And I mean, this is the bass. If it was at Groon's, it'd be $15,000, and I'd, you know, raid the kid's college fund to own this. The one, if he had one guitar, this is the one guitar you want, you know. So I'm stunned, you know, and I bring this thing home, and as soon as I got here, you know, went in the studio on Monday, took it with me, and a really good friend of mine, engineer at this studio, worked at all the time, was looking at it. We were talking about it, and he's a great guy from Kentucky, and he said, you know, your buddy knew what he was doing. He knew if he left this to you, he'd still be playing every day. And that really hit me, you know. But over time, anytime I do anything that has any historic significance and Eddie had turned me on to a lot of information about, you know, musicians that played on records before they were credited and all that. But I've done some pretty historic records, played a couple of Patti Page things, and she cut a version of Tennessee Waltz so she could own a master of that. And I made sure to play that bass on it. And you know, things like that have come up, these B.J. Thomas things. I mean, things that have some historical, because I pretty much don't take that guitar even to the studio unless I'm coming straight home. I'm not going to leave it in the trunk of my car while I eat lunch. I'm not letting that thing out of my sight. It's insured, but I could never.
Oh, you can't. Yeah.
You hear what I'm saying? I mean, I couldn't, you know, if I could find one identical, it wouldn't be the same thing to me. But I get tears in my eyes in these historic moments playing this thing. You know, I'm a tough guy, but I'm a real goober when it comes to that. And I think about Eddie all the time. And the fact that I knew him for years and he never even told me he owned this thing. I'd never seen.
That's the cool sort of like unknown, you know, the mystery of this whole thing.
Yeah, and that in his last couple days on Earth, knowing he was dying, he left this really detailed list of certain things he wanted, steel guitars he wanted to leave to people and his leather tooling stuff. You know, I'm like W.C. Fields. I'm going to be trying to cut a deal right up to the, you know. But, no, it's really humbling. This guitar is really special to me. And I you know, I sort of think that there's, you know, there's vibe in a lot of things. There's all kind of vibe in this guitar. And there's vibe in some of the studios, even the ones that shouldn't work. You know, the Fame and Muscle Shoals, nobody designed that room, you know. They just put a bunch of stuff up in there and called it a recording studio, but there's something going on in there. And I think I'd know that even if I didn't know the history. There's something that helps the communication. I don't know. It's a very intangible thing. Anyhow, that bass is, you know, I just can't. So I take it out and look at it. I take it out and hold it. You know, it's just a really, really it's the definitive bass instrument as far as I'm concerned. You know, that instrument or a jazz bass from that era is on like every record. You know, some massive percentage of all the records anybody ever made from 1958 on or whatever. So, yeah. Anyway, that's a long-winded but a really
that's a great story, and it's a great way to keep your relationship going with your friend who passed away.
Yeah, no, and I think, he's been gone a long time now, but I think about him all the time, and I do think maybe, wherever it is we end up, there's some connection. The times that I'm using that on something really important, I'm thinking, okay, Eddie, here we are, buddy.
Sure,
you're still playing. Yeah, pretty cool.
That's great, man.
Yeah.
If I asked you to pick your, and this is a moving target, this kind of stuff changes, your 3 favorite albums, and not in order, what would be the first 3 that comes to mind? Yeah, tough question.
Yeah, no, it's all right. I mean, I think Axis Bold as Love probably was one that really flipped my script, and still. And I was because I was playing guitar, and because I understand what it is now, but I didn't then. But because Ritchie Blackmore really spun my head around, I'd say like Deep Purple, In Rock, or Machine Head, or one of those first couple records.
Yeah, those are great.
Actually, Book of Taliesin. I mean, the solo on Kentucky Woman, still to this day, and that was like 1966 or 7. It's like this guy was so far ahead of, just bringing another musical intelligence to that. It was not a blues-based thing.
Yeah.
We had that too, Anyway, so one of those. And then, it's hard to pick only 3, but I would say pretty much any Donny Hathaway record. Because
he was a singer, right? I mean, I know his name.
Singer, songwriter, keyboard player. I think it was, he died young, very tragically, took his own life. But I think he was, I believe that he, was like bipolar at a time when people didn't understand what that was.
Sure.
But had he, just the body of work that he made while he was alive, and I think he was like 30 or maybe younger when he died. He wasn't, but if he'd have stuck around, he'd have been right there with Stevie. I mean, he really, at least in my opinion, and a brilliant singer, beautiful singer and writer, and those records are just full of emotion and vibe, and just tremendous performances. So,
what was one of his hits? Because I know I've heard the name, I just can't play.
Well, he was the duet partner on "Where's the Love" with Roberta Flack.
Okay, great song.
And then he wrote "Someday We'll All Be Free." I don't know if you know that tune. He wrote "This Christmas," which is like the hippest Christmas song ever. He's got a sort of quintessential recording of a "Song for You," which is the Leon Russell thing. I've been so many places, but that performance is just crazy, crazy good. Anyway, I'm a huge fan of what he did, and I mean, there's because he wasn't around that long, there's not that much of it, but any of it's just great. I
have to check some of his stuff out.
Yeah.
Hey, so you've been at this a while. What is something that you a minute? Yeah. What's something that you've learned about yourself, Mark, during this journey? Something that you've discovered either in you or about you because of this whole process?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, several things. I think that first of all, I like every other kid my older sister had the Beatle records, and I wanted to play the guitar. Like me and everybody else, right? But I pretty quickly into that sort of recognized that I understood more about music than I knew how to articulate, but like that things made sense to me. And then took because I didn't want to take anything else, took like a music theory class when I was a junior in high school, and all the heavy duty, stage band horn player guys were in there and stuff, who were all big readers and stuff. But I figured out right away, I understood way more about theory than they did from having played the guitar and from looking at this song. I'm looking at this guy, and with like interval stuff, I could hear all that. And the guy that taught that was his first year teaching. He was this really diminutive redheaded guy that really kind of wasn't equipped to, some sort of disciplinarian in this school, and a total classical church music guy, but there was nothing I could bring in there that he couldn't listen to once and play, like his understanding of what was. So the first Emerson, Lake and Palmer record was on. I remember I bring this thing in and it's like Take a Pebble, which I now know is just arpeggios, but the first time, not just arpeggios, but the first time I heard it, I'm like, the hell is that, So I brought it in, Mr. Murray Foreman, his name was. I brought it in, I played the beginning, and he went, and he went over and touched the piano to see what key it was in, and then played it like note for note. I was like, what? I got to know what this guy knows,
Right.
So I came to understand that I kind of had this connection to music, just it was part of me that I hadn't really understood before. You know what I mean? I was 13, 14 years, but I was starting to understand that I sort of knew more about this than that. I had some sort of intrinsic gift, I guess is what you would call it, And as I've gone through this, I think that I realized that for me, first of all, I appreciate the gift. I think I've applied myself to it, and I think I've built on it. But the initial thing that gave me that did not come from me, and I shouldn't be vain about it. It's that's something I didn't invent the gift. If I did the hard work, great, but I didn't. I had the acumen that was some intrinsic thing came from somewhere else. And then I think the other part that developed from that was that while I shouldn't be vain about it, I also shouldn't be falsely modest about it, and I should be appreciative of it.
Sure.
So when I know that when my son John started, playing, and I went from zero to hero like in one day because I could teach him to play Black Dog, But but with both my kids, as they got better into it, I was completely, all of my input was positive and supportive, but I didn't use words like great if it wasn't great, and if I knew they could do better. I don't think I'm doing them. I wasn't like some cruel taskmaster, but I just wasn't willing to say, I'd say that's good, but I know you can do better. And with each of them at a certain point, I could tell I was getting up their ass. And I said, look, you need to understand that I'm among the very best in the world at the thing that I do. And it was really offensive to both of them for a while, not understanding that there's no arrogance in that. I'm not saying I'm the only one or anything. It's just what I was saying was, here's why I'm saying that to you. Here's what gives me the credibility to say that to you. And here it's a loving thing for me to say this to you because I see what potential you have, and I want you to recognize it and live up to it, And so as both of them got further along, I mean, each of them came to me and said, it used to really bug me when you said that, but like now I understand what you're saying. And my older son Matthew, who plays on records down here, like he's among the best.
How old is he?
He's 29.
Okay.
And that's a statement of appreciation. It's not an arrogant thing, because if you understand my underlying thought, that didn't come from me.
Sure. No, I totally get it.
I'm just appreciating it, but I don't. It's a bad business practice, and it's a really weird metaphysical thing, in my opinion, to be with musicians where somebody comes up and says, wow, that was great. And they go, yeah, well, even a blind squirrel gets an acorn once in a while. It's like, you just told this person they don't know what they're talking about. If you can't think of something else to say, just say thank you. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's like, it's so to me, I'm not going to go pound my chest and go, wow, me. But when somebody comes and says, wow, that really brought that section to life, I'm going to say, thank you, man. It was a gas to do it. And I'm going to mean it, because it was, Right. So anyway, you're talking about the thing I discovered. I guess I just discovered that I'm appreciative of this gift. I'm never going to be done learning. I learn something every time I do this. I can see just around the periphery. I can understand that some of my capacity is going to diminish a little bit, energy-wise, or I just see some of the things that are going on. I'm going to be a little pickier about what I commit to doing and what I don't. But anything, that I do, I'm going to do 100%. I mean, it's 0 or 100, right? It's yes or no. So, I don't ever leave the house to go to work without really centering myself on what I think I'm on the planet for,
right.
which is really, it's not even to share my gift. It's just to enjoy it, It's just to go enjoy it and let whatever's going to happen from that, let the ripple effect from that happen. But if I go into a situation like that and I'm sitting there taking it for granted, or I'm thinking, this song's lame or whatever, I shouldn't be there. That's not the life I've chosen.
Yeah, well,
to paraphrase The Godfather.
Much of that is just your attitude on stuff, because you could have that attitude. You could not like what you're particularly doing and have a totally different attitude about it, and just the day is less stressful, it's happy, and everybody walks away smiling, as opposed to.
But I'm sure. I mean, I learned that from being on the other side of it. I learned that from looking at what was wrong with the picture, or thinking this gig is beneath me, or or I don't have any business being here because I'm not good enough, or I don't have any business being here because these guys are not good enough, or this is crappy dough, or when you're a kid and or you're riding around in a van with a bunch of sweaty guys and going, what the hell did I say yes to this for? It all has to do with sort of reframing. It has to do with getting some experience on understanding what you should say yes and no to, and then being who you're determined to be in the circumstances where you do say yes. For me anyway. And what you just said is right. It's all joy to me. I'm there to perform a really valuable function and to drive home feeling like I did my best work.
Totally.
And didn't leave any change, in my pocket.
Yeah. It's just about doing the job and,
joyfully.
Gratefully, right. Right.
Yeah.
Yes, there's plenty of other people they could pick,
Sure.
especially in a town like Nashville.
Sure.
But it's good. It's good that I got your message, though, as far as the thing you've learned is that you have this gift, you don't take it for granted, you appreciate it, and it's not idle for you. It's an ongoing, and your mission is to keep allowing that gift to keep growing and giving and learning. Yeah, which is cool.
And how that shows up sometime is, you went to a session here in Nashville, I know. So, we get, even in one session of 4 or 5 songs, where if different co-writers are coming in or whatever, we can get from somebody who's like a virtuoso musician to somebody who doesn't really play at all. I mean, and anywhere in between,
Yeah.
But I will have someone who doesn't play at all suggest some bass line to me, or try to sing something to me that he wants me to play. And, sometimes because it comes from somebody who's not a musician, your first take on that is like, that's not going to work, right? But years ago, I figured out, first of all, it will take less time for me to audition their idea for them than it will for me to try to talk them out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Second, way more than half of the time,
it's not
I find a new arrow to put in my quiver.
Yeah.
Like I go, wow, this is cool. Or, okay, that's not quite it, but that concept, how about we hybrid it to this? And then they go, yeah. And then I'm thinking, wow, so the next time I'm in a passage like this and somebody wants something different, I've got a whole new thing that as a musician I probably wouldn't have ever thought of, because it was kind of a non-musical idea.
Sure. Had you rejected what that person said in the first place,
or whatever the theoretical thing, to go, well, that's not how it's done. Says who? I've played on literally tens of thousands of recordings. Like, I got something to learn every time I do it.
Sure. School's never out for the pro.
Well, well said. Why didn't I just say that? I would have saved like 5 minutes.
Something or someone you miss from your childhood.
Something or someone
you miss from your childhood
that I now miss from my childhood.
Mm-hmm.
Musically or anyway?
No, anyway. Okay. It wouldn't be musically.
Yeah, wow, what a nice opportunity to sort of memorialize somebody. So I had a friend, like a really close, probably my first really close female non-girlfriend friend in the 8th grade, a girl named Kathy Haggerty, and we were really tight and great friends, and she passed away in the middle of the night.
Oh, wow.
Spinal meningitis or something. And I had seen her.
She'd sorry
been out of
that.
No. This is really nice. She'd been out of school that day. I went over after school to see her. They just thought she had a cold or something, and the next morning my mother woke me up and she was gone.
Holy shit.
It was, I realize it sounds, and it was horribly sad for all of us. I mean, it's just like, and really sort of personalizing death at a pretty early age. It's weird. I just watched John go through like someone he knew dying. It's
first time he experienced that.
Well, so when you're really little, you don't even. It's like your first concept of it is just sort of mythical, or it's a Disney cartoon or something, and then, you sort of, when you're 4 or 5 years old, you sort of actually conceptualize the idea that once something's gone, it's gone. And then, there's some point in your life where somebody who's kind of your contemporary or someone you knew pretty well, especially I think when you're in your teens and somebody your age, it's just again, not to sound, too much like Pollyanna here, but I think of her fondly, and she was an important part of my life, at that age. Who knows, we might not even have been friends a year later, how that stuff goes
of course.
In high school, but we were just very close then. And I had not had a female friend that was not somebody that I was trying to turn into my girlfriend, so it was, and you think you're so together when you're 14 years old or something, but you don't know shit from tuna fish. Anyway, it's that thing, oddly enough, and my dad, who was a pretty brilliant guy, had said to me once, he said, it's death on your shoulder that gives such value to living. And it's I think that her passing and my really incredibly fondness of her, fond memory of her, really over time helped to reinforce that idea, basically, that just, enjoy it the whole time, because you don't know, and that wasn't like some instantaneous thing that I wasn't like some brilliant philosopher when I was 14.
Yeah, you probably didn't get that at 8th grade, but it planted the seed
later, I still think of her, and it's just that, so, and that's just a moment in time, because like I said, by the time we were seniors in high school, we might not have even hung out together.
Sure.
You don't know, that stuff comes and goes, but that's somebody I miss from my childhood.
Or she could have been your first divorce.
Yeah, or second and third.
Tell me something about yourself people would either be surprised to hear or would find a little odd.
Well, what I think most people would be surprised to hear is that actually I'm a fairly introverted, shy person.
Wow. That is surprising.
Yeah, but this isn't an act. I mean, this is all in there.
Yeah.
I just I can spend lots as solitude's important to me. I can spend a lot of time alone. I like to. Thankfully, I have an awesome wife who understands that. Plus, she has to put up with me, so she's pretty happy for me to spend some time alone from time to time.
I hear you.
But I mean, I think that over the course of my life and my personal life and my business life, I have some sort of natural leadership skills and things like that. I find myself in that role a lot of the time. It's a role I really enjoy. I think I'm good at it, but I'm not insistent on being that guy. I'm just as happy to be a sideman. I'm just as happy to not be involved. I'm just as happy to be an observer. And I, quiet time and solitude is a really important thing to me. So as people get to know me, I know a lot of my wife's friends are like stunned that I'm such a private guy, but I really am. I don't think the two things are not congruent. And it's not like a gear I just flip on and off, like to go, okay, I'm going to put on my extrovert face.
Yeah.
The two things coexist in their correct place, but there's a big part of me that is not interested at all in being the center of attention or the life of the party or even noticed. I joke that you can only see me if I allow it.
No, and I think there's a difference between shy and private.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm not shy, but I'm pretty private. And I'll answer any question someone asks me,
right.
But I'm not going to be on Facebook, hey, here's my fucking fish tacos for dinner, or here's my son's new thing. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just not my thing. Yeah. I gotta keep shit. It's my joy. I don't know. I have a weird sense about that.
I'm with you there. I'm a very private guy.
Yeah.
It's and somehow those two things are not. They don't work against each other for me. They work together.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, none of this. I'm happy to. I love to hear myself talk, but I'm just as happy talking to myself. Nobody's got to listen. It's yeah. I do that a lot.
Do you talk? No, because I talk to myself. Like if I'm down, I talk to myself to if I have some stupid thoughts going through my head, I actually have found that it helps me. The fact that I have awareness of it is great because I could address whatever is bringing me down, and just talking to it and almost saying, Craig, what are you thinking this for? You're being really silly here. I mean, that sounds ridiculous, but that helps. It helps me, if I'm, and it doesn't happen often. Thank goodness, I'm not a guy that gets down very often, but that's one thing I found that helps me, oddly enough.
No, I talk to myself a lot, and when I'm alone at the house, I have, massive conversations with my favorite person. And, but when the kids were growing up, I'd say something and they go, were you talking and I would say, no, I was talking to myself. It's a sign of genius. I made that up. But until my kids still think that talking to yourself is a sign of genius because I never told them any different.
Told them otherwise, right?
Yeah.
Oh man. So, what's your non-musical superpower? Maybe that's it. You talk to yourself and actually pay attention.
Let's see. My non-musical superpower is that. One of them is that I was had a moment of extreme lucidity and was smart enough to marry my wife.
How long have you guys been together?
21 years. I'm supposed to know these things, huh?
Awesome. Congratulations.
Yeah. Well, and the story there is that I never wanted to be married. I had never been married. I loathed children. I used to aim for them in the road with my car. I mean, I wasn't going to actually hit them, but and I'd go in a restaurant and they'd say smoking or non-smoking. I'd just go, put me where there's no fucking kids, I mean, I just couldn't stand it. And I hired I hired my wife to sing in this show. This is a long story. I was not living in Phoenix, but I got hired by some guys back there to put this big kind of music variety production thing together and did that kind of long distance back and forth. And I hired her to sing in it, and she had these two little kids, and I just fell in love with a whole bunch of them, and I must have been ready. And we got married and had John the first year we were married, and I went from being, never married, no kids, to having 3 kids in a year, and that never caused me any trepidation at all. Now, Michelle and I had all the problems that people have when they first get married, I mean, crazy in love with each other, but first few years we had some pretty rocky ups and downs, and I'm 14 years older than she is, so there's that. And we worked our way through all of that, but there was never a time when I was sitting there going, wow, why did I take these kids on? And I knew them, we had worked together, and then when this thing turned into something else, we kept that relationship out of the kids' lives until we were sure we were going to do something with it. But I'm so close to them. I had them pretty much all their lives, and their dad, great guy, friend of mine. Yeah, so I really think about, like, just for once, I wasn't a bonehead, it's like, because all my instincts, my paradigm, if you ask me to define myself, like, don't want any part of that. And I know why. I mean, I started playing as the youngest guy in the band with all these guys in high school, and the first bunch graduated, and then I played with some other guys that were older than me. And pretty much all of those guys got somebody pregnant before we got out of high school. And they were either, we didn't call it that then, but they were either a deadbeat dad, which was not cool with me because I came from a great family. And I'm looking at these guys going, what do you mean you don't, even though I hadn't formed those thoughts, I'm 16, I'm going, what do you mean you're trying to get out of paying for your kid? I mean,
Yeah.
Or they weren't musicians anymore and they were working 2 gas station jobs because they were 18 years old and they didn't have a skill. And none of that looked like something, because I was going to be a rock star, and that looked like that was part of my plan at all. And then you go through your life until later and you think, okay, well, I didn't do that and I'm glad I didn't. And, I remember just before I met my wife, I was thinking, wow, I made it. Hey,
Boom.
Yeah. Careful at tempting fate. But anyway, if I had to say, and she'll never hear this because she doesn't care what I do or say, but the single best thing I ever did in my life was marry her. It really was. I mean, all of these great, if I had to pick one action that was the best thing I've ever done, it was that. And I say that with the full seasoning of 21 years living together. It's never been better. You know what I mean? Because
I do, 100%.
All that stuff's out of the way, and my relationship and our relationship with our children is fantastic. They love us. We spend a lot of time, and they're all grown up. I mean, our daughter's 31 and Matt's 29. John's 20 now. 20. Holy crap. Anyway, but my joke is, but it's true. Like, they don't, they can sleep indoors and feed themselves without us. They don't need to, they're not required to still like us, and they do, and we're all very close. And I, for a guy who never considered any of that to be anything that I was remotely interested in, it's the most important thing to me, and has been for years and years and years, really from the time I married her. And it has given such amazing value to everything that I do. I can't imagine what my life would be like without that. I intended for it to never be. I'd be some embarrassing old guy with copper-colored hair and a 24-year-old girlfriend who did with IQ or something. Anyway, I'm really glad I'm where I am.
Good, man. That's a nice story. Glad for you. You have any hobbies or interests outside of music?
Not much anymore. I was a pretty active athlete in high school and grew up in hockey country. Played a little, kind of, I guess, semi-pro or not quite, but pretty active in the hockey thing after that. And but most of the stuff that I'm interested in now, just it all flows out of this musical thing. And when I'm not doing that, I'm really interested in spending time. Our daughter and her husband have a salon and wellness spa here that they have, and we're active in helping them with that, helping to promote and do things, and just helping the kids find their way through things. It's really joyful to me, and that's kind of my thing. I don't have a lot of hobby things. I'm not. This is kind of my world.
I asked a guitar player one time. I said, "Do you have any hobbies?" I said, "Do you have any hobbies outside of music?" He goes, "Guitars."
Right. Yeah.
Oh, it was funny as shit.
Yeah.
Is there anything, like, if you could go back in time and do one thing differently, either business or personally, is there anything that you would change?
Nope. Now, there are some things that I'm not proud of, but, arriving here and understanding that all of those things got me here, I wouldn't change anything because I really like here,
I hear you.
I have said and done things to people that that I wish I hadn't, but all part of the learning curve. I just don't see how you get I got here on exactly the route that brought me here.
Yeah, yeah. You
so
can't,
all of that had to happen, you know.
Yeah, if you made a left instead of a right, the whole course of life could have changed sometimes, you know.
Sure, and I think it's easy to look back in retrospect and go, wow, I wish I had. But, you know, that's how I learned not to do that.
Yeah.
Was by, you know, whatever, I'm not even thinking of a specific example, but things, you know, where you wish you had behaved or acted differently or something, and you look back and go, well, yeah, but I mean, that's what I wanted to do at the time. And then in the aftermath of that, I looked at it and went, yeah, that's not who I want to be, you know?
Yeah. So,
but, you know, so I could have done it then, or I could have done it a month later or a year later, whatever, but it all got me here. So I'm not going to try to, I'm really, I'm really in the bubble right now. I don't want to rewrite that history, you know? So
good.
Anyway, yeah.
Toughest decision you've ever had to make, or hardest thing you ever had to do that you can share?
It wasn't a decision, but the hardest thing I've ever had to do was unplug my dad.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, and there was no question about it. We could do a whole 10-hour interview about my father, who really was a fantastic guy, and I realize that more every day. But he, toward the end of his life, and way ahead of the curve always on so many things, but he had like the whole living will and the whole do not, you know, he had been very, so he had some heart difficulty in his 60s, lived to be 80 and really robust, but he understood that he had some damage, and he understood that he was going to probably almost certainly predecease my mother. And he made provision for that like way ahead of time, and went out of his way to have separate conversations with my mother and my sister and myself, really applicable to who we all were, you know, but to make it really clear that there was a way he was interested in continuing to live and then a way he was absolutely not interested, you know. So he had some difficulty in his 70s, but that fell into the first category, and he came roaring back from all of that stuff, had open heart surgery and had a couple congestive issues that he got through. But in the final thing that happened to him when he was 80, he had a pretty massive heart attack, I guess, at home. And where they lived was very close to the hospital. If they'd have lived another 2 miles away, I think this would have been a non-issue. But they got there right away, and they got him. But he'd been, you know, oxygen deprived. I mean, it was really clear. And this was very specific to the living will he had and everything else. Under these circumstances, you know, it was not going to be able to, you know, stay alive without something assisting him breathing and all this kind of stuff. You know, so he basically didn't, if he couldn't have some sort of quality of life, he wasn't interested in being around. And he was really clear about it. And he was clear in writing, and he was clear to his doctor, and he was clear to all of us. And that was the moment, you know. And so there wasn't any question at all about what needed to be done. It wasn't a judgment call.
Yeah, it was just an execution.
Yeah, well, that's a poor choice of words, but
yeah, but sorry, but you know,
no, but
implementation.
No, it was, you know, it was very clear what, and so it was really honoring his request. I mean, it would have been 180 degrees antithetical to what he wanted to not. Well, I think it probably would have been illegal. I mean, it's a legal document, but his doctor at the time was this young kind of arrogant guy that had come from Canada. I didn't think much of him, but he was good at what he did. You know, he just kind of full of himself, and which is never fun, you know, kind of rare in a doctor.
Yeah, especially a young one.
yeah, young cardiologist, right. But this guy came up to the waiting room and said, and broke into tears, you know, and just said, you know, your dad's such a great guy. I hate to let him go, but I mean, it's really clear what, you know, this isn't going to change. This thing is not going to, this is what it is, you know, and we all knew that. And so that was the, you know, as the male offspring, I got to make the call, you know, and you know, like, again, there wasn't another call to make. But you know, my pop, man, it was, you know, it's
tough.
You want to, you know, we stalled around.
It's not a picture.
You got to call it, you know?
Yeah. And that's not a picture or a situation that you ever envision or could prepare yourself for, if you even could envision it.
Right.
And I think it's like being pregnant. You can't know what it's like to do that unless you've done it.
Yeah, I'm sure that's right. But his example has made me, sort of lay that same groundwork for myself.
Sure.
And nobody, I have a game plan, which is to die young at a very old age. And I'm doing the things I think I need to do that. And some of that's in your control and some of it's not. But almost nobody in the nursing home said, gee, I hope I end up there. You know? So, this sounds like kind of a downer conversation, but it's not to me. I learned a ton from his example. This guy was, chose his own way out too, which to the extent that we can, that all control is kind of an illusion, but that was, it was a bittersweet thing, but no question in my mind that's the way he wanted. Well, there wasn't another way. I mean, there really wasn't at that point. He probably wouldn't have lived anyway. And if he had, he'd have suffered massive brain damage, wouldn't have been able to breathe on it. So it was that kind of thing. Yeah. But it's still, I stalled around for an hour before I, there's no, you run that thing through your head as many ways as you can, and you ask all the questions you can, but there was not another way,
Well, I'm real sorry for your loss, and I really appreciate you sharing that.
Hey, you know what? It was a long time ago, and I was really, it was really a gift that he was around as long as he was, and that I had this amazing adult relationship with him too.
Yeah.
We're incredibly close. No regrets there, man. None. Sure. Life well lived. Just my sadness and sense of loss was for myself, and certainly not for him. He lived it on his terms. Really, really remarkable, interesting guy. Just another guy from that generation. But he was, I forget. My dad was like 5'8" or something. He's like a giant in my memory. But
that's great.
He was not a big guy. I see pictures of him and go, really? But yeah. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm thank you for sharing that. That was very touching.
Well,
I just got one more question left, and
Sure.
you might have even answered it. My question is, what's the best advice you've ever been given? And I wrote down here when you said it that you're the guy on the date, but
you're the cat.
You're the cat on the date. Maybe that's it. I don't know, but that was pretty damn good.
Well, I'll tell you, in terms of professional advice, in terms of being a successful, professional working musician, if you don't know anything else and you know that, and you understand what that means, it'll serve you really, really well, But I guess the best, and I didn't understand this until, relatively recently, but the best advice is, to thine own self be true.
Yeah, man.
That's where at least for me, where all the peace of mind is, and I think that, this is a semantic and it's goofy, but people talk about giving 110%. Just because I'm a literal guy, that's impossible. So to me, it's 0 or 100 at this point in my life. I'm going to say yes, and if I do, you're going to get everything I got. And I think no is one of the most powerful, wonderful words in the English language, and I think it's really great.
And it's a sentence. I've been telling my wife that for 25 years. She's always with the kids, and she's always no, and then here's why. I'm like, babe, no is a sentence. You could just say no.
Yeah.
You don't need their permission to explain to them why you're disciplining them or telling them no.
Sure. Sure, but they're born in like instinctive master negotiators, and they have no other job. It's like you got a life, and all they got to do is talk you out of what you just said. That's the whole thing.
Yeah.
But it's understanding that you say yes to the things, and if you say yes, you give it everything you got.
Yeah.
And if you're not willing to, if you're a 90% person, then say no.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, man, you have given 110% on this, and I really appreciate every minute of it. Any final words of wisdom or non-wisdom?
Well, let me think about that for a second. No, I think I better quit while I'm winning. But really appreciate this, Craig. Great time.
Oh man, me too. The pleasure's mine. Yeah. I honestly, I really enjoyed this. I'm glad I got to know you. I'm glad we're connected now, and thank you very much for everything and for your time, and thank you for the audience for listening. Sure. Everybody, I hope you enjoyed this interview as much as I did. Thanks again to Mark Prentice for spending time with us. Go to everyonelovesguitar.com, sign up to get notified about future episodes, and along with some cool stuff for guitar players. Now, be nice, go play your guitar, and most important, have fun. Till next time, peace and love, and I'm out, everybody. Thank you. We hope you enjoyed this show. If you did, subscribe to the Everyone Loves Guitar podcast, and you can do this online at everyonelovesguitar.com or on iTunes. And if you like the show, please leave us a 5-star positive review. The more 5-star reviews we get, the higher our show ranks, and higher rankings mean we get to continue speaking with cool, interesting guests on our show. We'll see you on the next episode, and until then, keep playing your guitar and have fun making music.